The cicadas are coming. We know. We get them in Utah every single year. This is a really cool one I've been playing with lately. It's called the F-22 Cicada, named after the F-22 Raptor. Maybe the best airplane ever in the world.
Dude, that's a big brown.
Okay, this is a really cool cicada pattern that I've been playing with lately. Mostly because Hairline came out with this high float foam. It's kind of like an Evazote type material. Great colors, and it comes in 2 and 3 mil. All right, we'll start out whatever thread you like. This is actually Vivas 70 denier. It's not a thread that we use very much, but it's a really, really strong thread per diameter, or by diameter. I don't know. I'm learning English. We'll see. All right, so this is going to be a super cool foam cicada. It can be simple. You can take a lot of time and make it look real pretty, but some real basic elements to the fly. We're going to put a piece of foam underneath the fly, secure it in place. We're going to build a body on top of the fly, secure it in place, and then we're going to build a head out of a piece of foam like that, and then we have an indicator. So as you can see, I prepped everything in advance to hopefully make this a little bit shorter. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of foam, maybe half the width of the hook gap, maybe a little more, and I'm going to cut in just a tiny little notch into this, only about 2 mil long, and I'm going to take that and put the notch right here into that hook. So see how the hook slides in? That's where I'm going to first tie this in. This is kind of an awkward way to start this, but it really adds to the fly. So I'm going to start, so my first tie-in should be like this, and when you get that tied in, take about 10 or 12 turns or so and make an orange band there. So cicadas are black and orange around here mostly, and you don't want a ton of orange on there, just a little taste. So on the bottom, should look like that. All right, so we're going to advance forward on the hook a little bit more, and we're going to do the same thing. So as you can see, when I'm making these segments, I'll show you on the next one, that I'm getting it here, and I don't have a lot of pressure. When I want to wrap this, I'm pushing the foam all around. So what I'm doing is I'm just making a light turn until I get onto the other side, and then I can put pressure as I push it against. So as I pull away from me, I put pressure, and you can see it created a nice little round foam bulb. All right, one more of those and we ought to be ready to move on. Okay, so there we have our underbody, and I'm just going to cut all that off. Feel free to do an underbody of dubbing if you want on this fly. There are really no rules, but this is going to help with buoyancy quite a bit. And then I'm going to come in here. You'll see why later, but I'm going to cut these down to a little angle. It's easier to do it now than wait until the body's on. Okay, so I've cut a piece of foam about, I don't know, double the width of the hook gap. Okay, and I'm just going to take that foam and I'm going to fold it over. And it looks like I'm a little bit too much. So I'm just bending that to make sure that I just kind of want to cover the sides. I'm going to make that a little more narrow. And I like to just adjust this per fly. So 'cause sometimes, you know, I have it bound in a little bit more. So there I have it. It just kind of rests right on top of this big bunch of foam without covering it up. If it's too long, it will cover up the bottom of the foam. I'm actually going to go a little bit thinner. Okay, so I like that width. So now we're going to dial in the length. I have kind of determined that I like this piece of foam to be equal to the length of the hook shank before it bends down. Okay, so we have a piece of foam that looks like this. All right, it's going to fold over. So I'm going to take this part and I'm going to make kind of a subtle curve in it with my scissors. Like that. It doesn't have to look pretty. So I've done that on both sides, and if you really want it to look awesome, you can take a lighter to it. Not necessary whatsoever, okay? Now, this is a part that's kind of tricky. I'm going to take this out of the vise, and I'm going to try to do this right here so that you can see what I'm doing. All right, I have a different bobbin thread threaded up with the same thread or something similar. And the pointy part of this, I'm just going to take in my fingers and I'm going to pinch it so that it folds over on top of itself, like that, okay? Now, down here, I'm going to grab onto my thread, give myself an anchor point, and then I'm just going to take that thread and I'm going to wrap it around the very end of this. This is easier said than done, okay? That thing's supposed to stay out of the way. So I'm going to trim that tag end. And if there's an extra tag there at the end, no biggie, we can trim it out of there. So just like 3 or 4 turns of thread, we'll lock that down pretty well. Nuke some of those thread fibers out of there. And now I'm just going to coat down in there with super glue. I mean, if you're an overachiever, you could throw whip finish in that if you wanted. And we'll just trim that off. All right. Because we're making a video, I'll singe these little thread tags up.
Haters.
Haters. We have a body that looks like this now. Okay, I'll just kind of rotate that all around. That is the body that will help us create. If you can see now, if I fold that, look how perfect that is for like a cicada. All right, so we'll grab our hook and we'll throw that back in the vise. Try to make it level as best we can. All right, now all we're going to do is we're going to put this in right here, and I'll tie it in right about like that. Okay. These little fellas need to be trimmed again. Just trim them so they don't look unnatural. And to get this to stay in place, so I kind of want the body to be a little bit narrow down here, and then as it goes back, kind of widen out. See that? So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to fold that foam out of the way, and I'm just going to super glue on the sides of the body and on top. All right, now I should be able just to squeeze that, and I don't want to push this all the way down on the body. I kind of want it coming up at an angle, and I'll just glue the sides down. And this high float foam takes a little bit longer for the super glue to really cure, so you have to hold it in place a little bit. All right, so there you have it. There's a really cool cicada type shape without adding tons of bulk to the fly. And I'm going to trim this one more time. Boom, there we go. All right, so now we're ready to start building the head on this. As you know, cicada heads are really big and round, a lot of bulbs to them, they have big beady eyes. So for this section, I'm going to use a piece of foam. Let's see, it is definitely wider than the hook gap, but just a little bit. So that's the piece that we're going to use. And we're going to create a bullet head out of foam. So the way I like to do that is instead of just poking a hole through a piece of foam and then folding it over, I like to tie a piece on top and a piece on bottom. It really prevents the foam from spinning around. So make sure that your thread is right here, right against the eye. Then I'm going to take this piece of foam and push it all the way against the body, and I'm going to pre-pinch this foam before I wrap it, and just put some tight wraps here. And before you let go with your hand, just let your thread follow that excess back as you slide your fingers back. And you can see it creates a really nice tight tie-in point. You can go over that a bunch of times if you need to. Now, we're going to do the same thing on the bottom. Rotary vise makes that a lot easier. And again, right up against the edge, we'll start right at the hook eye and wrap back. The reason why I don't like to wrap forward toward the hook eye is it's really hard to tell once you get to the hook eye. So if you just start there and wrap back, you know that you're plenty far forward. if you don't wrap your thread forward enough, the bullet head won't look quite very good. So I'm going to cut that off. Now on the bottom section, I'm going to push this back like this. And you can see it likes to catch on the hook a little bit. So I cut a little tiny slit here so that when I push that up and glue it in place, it will be right where I want it. All right. So now we're going to tie in a wing. Now, I like to have a kind of a rigid material. So like EP fibers are rigid. You could do it with some other rigid fibers, but this isn't just like normal polypropylene. It's a little bit more rigid. So I'm using AJ's trick where I burned the ends of this. I've been using this same patch for a few flies. But what I'm going to do is my wing's going to be about that long. I'm going to tie it in right here going forward, and we're using this little lump of foam to our advantage because I want these to splay out to the side. So as you can see, this is going to be on this side. I'll just grab this other wing, pull it over, and tie it down on the other side. So there I have a nice splayed wing. For now, I'll just trim this about that long, and we'll mess with that later. I do want this to have some visibility and a little bit more buoyancy, so I'm going to use the Fulling Meal Ultra Dry yarn. And I'm just going to tie that in. I think this is 2 strands worth of it. Wrap back and pull it on top of itself. And then this one, I'm only going to leave about that long. So you can see it has a little bit of brightness to it, and it adds buoyancy. All right, so we're sitting pretty well right there. Take your thread all the way back to where those wings start. And now we're going to make the head on this fly. So critical to use super glue on this because when you pinch them together with your fingers, it makes a nice flat head. I'll show you what that means in a second. And you don't want to, you want to stick around to the end on this one because I'll show you a really cool way to make buggy eyes on the cicada. So first things first, push the bottom up with my thumb. We're going to tie that down using that same technique we used for the body where you just, loose tension until you need it. Pull the top over as well. We'll tie that down. Now, that's a pretty cool head. See how it's nice and bulbous? But I want it a little flatter, so I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to squish it. And that's going to squish that super glue all together. And now look at what we have. We have a more streamlined head. That's kind of what I'm looking for on this fly. So I'm going to come in here and trim the foam just like that. You can even get fancy and cut a V in it. Brig, don't tell the haters we're getting fancy. I don't know, you can do some fun stuff with that. Anyway, we gave it little horns. Now it looks like an evil cicada. All right, so bottom, we'll just cut that one, nothing special, just about like that. Now, we're going to add those eyes. I said it was at the end. It's really right now, but we're close. I'll show you the way to put legs on next. So I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to go over the top, cross over, and go around the hook eye, and then back over across. All right, so now that I've got 2 of those crisscrosses in place, now I can go over that a few times and my thread will just kind of follow the path of the previous one. Anyway, we built that up a little bit so you can see we have little eyes on it, little buggy eyes. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab some of these funny centipede legs. Sometimes these are called orange, sometimes they're copper, sometimes they're whatever, but find some that look like that. I'm going to take 2 per side. Tie those in, and I like to just loop them around to the other side. All right, now the final step is we're going to throw on an indicator Trust me, sometimes this is going to ride pretty low. Sometimes it's nice to have something that's a little more vertical for your indicator. So I'll throw this one on there. Just like that, and I'll just trim this bad boy. Okay, we're just going to whip finish this. So how do we do that with all this crap in the way? We're just going to ride this little notch all the way down to the eye. Now grab your favorite Frank Mattarelli whip finisher that your buddy Swenny gave you and cinch that down. Use your imagination. Pick your favorite head cement and imagine that I put it on there right now. Sometimes we don't do that step in videos, but it's a good one. What I'm doing now is I've just grabbed all the legs, I've pushed them forward, trim them once, and now they all pop out at the same length. Cicadas have pretty short, stubby legs, so you don't need to leave them very long. Now, for this wing, I'm going to trim those about right there. The wings are a little longer than the body. And now I'm just going to take a comb and brush them out. And yes, I know, they're not going to stay like that forever. But what I'm going to do is see how they're nice and flat. I'm going to make them unnice and flat. I'm just going to round off those wings. Just because we can. We're in the studio. You know, we do art here, Brigham. This is art. Artistes is what we are. And we like making artsy looking stuff. So, you know, all of you pros who do demos and get paid for all the money, if you do this in front of people, they will freaking buy this, you know, because look at those wings. They're all nice and rounded now. But anyway, that is a fun and killer cicada pattern.